Good afternoon, Matteo.
Hi, how are you?
I'm fine, and you?
I'm fine, thank you. Sorry for the late delay.
No, that's not a problem at all. Matteo, I saw I found you on Instagram, and I am really so interested in this ensemble that you have, and you play period music.
Yes.
I gather, and then I also saw that that you are. I mean, you have a long list of things that you do. You're a conductor, you're a composer, you're a harpsichord player, organ player,
Yes.
and you're a musicologist as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
I studied musicology, and I'm also active in research, musicological research. Yes.
Yeah. So what is the interest in the period music? Where did that come from?
I started, of course, as organist and a harpsichord player, clavichord player.
Yeah.
I was a child, of course, with Baroque music, and here in Bologna there was and there is a big interest for early music. Luigi Ferdinando Tagliavini was one of the founder of this movement of our Italian Orgelbewegung. So my professor Sergio Vartolo, Francesco Cera, it was also my very first harpsichord teacher. And then in the conservatory, in the musical academy here in Bologna, in the tradition of Padre Martini, Padre Mattei, and Marco Rico Bossi, I studied organ and organ composition, so counterpoint, and under Umberto Pirinsky. And Umberto Pirinsky was the director of the Academy, International Academy for early Italian organ music in Pistoia, near Bologna, in Tuscany. And I was more and more interested in early organ, ancient organs. Here in Italy, we have a lot. In Bologna, also in the Bologna province, more than 300. So, and I started to grow my interest for early music, for Baroque music. Of course, Bach was always my first interest, and so I started to listen also the Vienna early music movement, Harnoncourt, most of all cantatas when I was child, and so I started to deepen this interest, and then I founded this ensemble when I was 24, Capella Augustana, and we started to record some Lutheran works written by Italian composers or by composers influenced by Italian music, like Schütz. We recorded a lot of Schütz, 19 CDs for brilliant classics of the Irish Schütz edition. And at the beginning, it was planned as a complete recording of Schütz works, but after 19 CDs, there were change of direction in brilliant classics in Holland, and they stopped the project of a complete recording, and so there were 4 CD box republished in one box. Yes, and this with international artists from Germany, from Poland, from Czech, from America, from France, from Italy, of course. And this is maybe the biggest musical production project I have never realized. Yes, of course. And I have recorded several solo CDs in Germany, on Bach historical organs in Saxony, in Thuringia, and Thüringen, and in Sachsen-Anhalt, and also in in Niedersachsen. And so Bach, I recorded the third part of Klavierübung. I recorded the canonical variations on Vom Himmel hoch, the Commissaire. And I recorded on 3 harpsichords, the Art of Fugue, the Kunst der Fuge, the musical offering, ein musikalisches Opfer, and then the Schubler chorals at the organ, again, and 8 great preludes and fugues from the Leipzig period by Bach. Recently, it was issued my complete recording of the Vienna organist and Munich Kapellmeister Johann Caspar Kerl, who was a student under Carissimi here in Italy, in Rome, and one of the most important keyboard virtuoso of the history, I think, for sure, from the 17th century. And also Luzzaschi, the professor of Frescobaldi, a virtuoso Ferrara composer, also madrigal composer. I recorded the first complete recording of keyboard works on the organ, an historical organ here in Bologna, on 3 harpsichords and on a spinet. Yes, spinet. Spinet, yeah. Or the virginal, like. Yeah.
Okay. What are there many musicians that have this interest in these period music? Because if you form an ensemble and if you talk about all these recordings as well, and are there many musicians who play these period music?
Yes, a lot, of course. Yes, but there were, when we started the Schütz project, this was maybe the first complete Schütz recording planned with historical instruments. Yes. And then my approach was a little bit different from other approaches. Now, for example, the Dresden Kammerchor is recording a complete Schütz recording, but with a choir, so with many voices, several voices per part. And my approach is a little bit different, because I'm very convinced also in Bach that the Rifkin studies and also the Parrot studies are completely right musicologically and also musically. And I recorded Schütz with normally with 1 singer per part. While in the Passions, I have used 2 singers per part, so there are 8 singers, 2 sopranos, 2 altos, 2 tenors and 2 basses. And so, as was normal in the middle and little chapels of the Schütz time, also Bach time, in Italy and in the German Roman Empire. So, for example, in England and in France, with the kingdoms, there were a lot of, not a lot, but normally it could be also 4 singers per part, 5 singers, in Handel oratorios, for example. But Bach wanted to have 12 singers for a choir, so a choir was a word to mean a tutti, so a group also of instruments. So the choir was also the orchestra. So, and Bach used normally he asked to have 12 singers, so three, in order to be able to conduct a double choir motet, so an 8-part motet, if 1 singer per part was ill.
Yeah.
So this means, for example, that for Bach, a double choir was enough, 8 singers. So, and there are a lot of parts. There is a very big polemic between the Rifkin and Parrot vision and the Kopman, Wolf, Christoph Wolf, and also Gardner, of course, side, so the vision. But in general, the modern choir concept is a concept of not of professional singers, of after the French Revolution, when there are the Liebhaber, so wie Deutsche sagt, the not professional people who sang together. And before in the churches, there were only singers paid or children professionally trained.
Yeah.
And the singers, of course, were in Bach's case, Rifkin showed also that at the beginning of his Leipzig career, Bach had at his disposition normally 8 singers. He started to compose the first cantatas in Leipzig for 8 singers, and then he chose to have only 4 in order to be more virtuoso, like in the Italian manner, like Italian opera. Yes. So the choir, the word choir in Bach means tutti, so the 4 soloists and all the orchestra. And the orchestra normally was in Leipzig of 2 first violins and 2 second violins, so 4 violins, 1 viola, a violone for that was not violoncello. Violoncello was maybe instrument da braccio, like violin or viola composer. Yeah. This is typical Bolognese instrument that was not for continuo but for solo. Often the violoncello, the solo violoncello part in the cantata, violoncello piccolo part by Bach, are written in the part of first violin. So this was not the gamba instrument like modern cello or Boccherini cello, but instead there was a 8-foot string bass for sure. This was maybe a little bit bigger than actual cello, and called violone or violoncello are all terms to indicate bigger violin. So violone, violoncello in Italian. And then a big violone, so a contrabass, double bass, 16-foot instrument. But organ was played with pedal, the organ continuo, and also with a 16-foot in the hands on several manuals in Germany, normally. So, for example, this approach was now followed by Sigvald Köken, but he didn't or doesn't use the 16-foot. And this is, I think, not correct historically, because every church, also in Vienna now, there are often organs in Austria with original violone, big violin, for the church, that is a 16-foot instrument, because often the Austrian organs were 8-foot, so they didn't have the contrabass, the double bass octave, the octave. So, but in Germany, in the Lutheran Germany, in Leipzig, there were pedals, organ pedals, developed to play the continuum basses of cantatas, of ensemble music.
When the music was composed and it was played, so it would be, say Bach, for example, that he composed just for the organ, and then the piece was just played on organ, or were there then other instruments with as well for a concert?
The organ music by Bach is normally music for organ, of course. Then the clavichord music by Bach was chamber music, so not music for the church organ, but the organs were 99% in that time only the churches. So it was a church instrument used as a solo instrument or in chamber music. So in church ensemble music, cantatas, or like continuo instrument, normally. The clavichord today played mostly at the harpsichord, but in Germany the normal instrument, home keyboard instrument, were in that time also in Austria clavichord, and in Italy we have forget the clavichord after the Monteverdi age, the seconda pratica, bel canto age, because the clavichord was too soft. two lies, in order to be listened and in order to accompany a singer. But in Germany, the viola da gamba, the soft instrument, blockflöte, the lute, and the clavichord were favorite also in the 17th, 18th century. So, and so the Bach music, Bach harpsichord music today, we tell harpsichord music is really almost only clavichord music as first choice. And then there are some works written for two manuals harpsichord, so the Italian concerto, the French ouverture, the Goldberg, so-called Goldberg variations, and the harpsichord concertos, of course. But the also Forkel, the first Bach biographer, who was informed by Carl Philipp Emanuel Bach and was clavichord student under Friedemann Bach, so the first son by Bach. He told that Bach's favorite instrument was clavichord. That this is for sure. Only Wanda Landowska didn't like clavichord and created a new fashion for harpsichord and not against clavichord. The right and much more interesting pioneer school, the early music school of Dolmetsch, Arnold Dolmetsch, and his students, so Violet Gordon Woodhouse, and other, the son of Dolmetsch, Rudolf Dolmetsch, they were correctly convinced that Bach's keyboard works are for as first choice clavichord works. Has of course the Buxtehude works today play the harpsichord normally. There are recent studies in which they showed that in the Thuringia, there were so few harpsichords, and maybe the young Bach had not occasion to have an harpsichord home for a long time, as also the young Beethoven was a clavichord player, of course, before to be a virtuoso pianist. The harpsichord was used for chamber music to accompany, to play continuo. That was the favorite instrument, also for Bach. Forkel tells that Bach liked the strong sound for the ensemble music, but was very satisfied of his soft clavichord with many Schattierungen, colors of the sound. And also Forkel tells that the piano was in a too early stage of develop to be a favorite instrument for Bach. But Bach tried the Zimmermann pianos, of course. He appreciated also the second production, the last production of Zimmermann. He maybe was a seller. He sold Zimmermann piano to a Branitsky count, a Polish count, and maybe Bach was completely satisfied by the last Zimmermann piano, but was a 17th century man, and he was first of all a clavichord player, and also the organ was studied at home on clavichords. If you were rich, you could have a double clavichord, one clavichord and another in up, to imitate two manuals organ, and a third clavichord for pedals, with a pedal claviatura, so pedal claviatura, pedal tastatura. This was typical in Lutheran Germany, where they used the pedal as virtuoso players, with a solo parts, pedal parts. The less rich and less healthy people, organists, the student had pedal keyboard attached, pulled down, like was normal in Catholic organ world. So in South Germany, in Austria, there were also independent pedal, but shorter with less pedals, and in Italy normally only connected to keyboard, to manual. Yes.
That's interesting, because I was just going to want to ask you, how did they practice if they only had the organs in the churches?
Yes,
now you say this is
yes.
and with you as well. How did you play the organ? How did you practice?
I play normally. I played a lot in churches, of course. I was also church organist in San Domenico in Bologna, a big church where San Domenico, there is the grave of San Domenico, and with 3 historical organs. One organ was played during the Bologna period of Mozart, by Mozart, but now I study organ on. I have a small collection of pedal pianos, historical pedal pianos. I have no place, not enough place to have all in my apartment. Some students of mine have some of my pedal pianos, and so they can also study. And I have a home a pedal piano from Pfeiffer, from a piano factory. The year is 1888, and on this piano, that it was, of course, planned for a flugel, for a grand piano. But I have a harpsichord with 2 manual harpsichord. One of my harpsichords, and so I can play the 2 manuals on the harpsichord, and the pedal with dynamic on pedal piano. I have not a pedal clavichord. This is a shame, but I have played because a friend of mine, when I was very young, had a pedal clavichord home, and I was here in Bologna, and I was often in his apartment. I have a clavichord, of course, but manual clavichord, normally for hands. And I'm one of the few organists that today has not a digital organ. No digital organ home. I'm organ professor. I'm completely against. My students know it, against the Hauptwerk system, the electronic organs, also the electric tractor transmissions, because these are completely on this instrument. These are dangerous in order to study organ, because the touch of the direct contact with air, with the instrument, you can also have some dynamic effect on a mechanical organ, of course, like harpsichord. Harpsichord has dynamic differences, are very few, but if you play with different key velocity on the harpsichord, for sure you can, if you are a sensible artist and musician, you can listen the difference. And this was clear to German harpsichord technique, because Quandt, the flute player, in his wonderful treatise on flute, speaks about the difference on the harpsichord, clavichord, it has in German, of the age of the hand. So if you play more with more strong or less strong, the harpsichord react differently, and also the mechanical organ, of course. These are things very, very few you can listen if you are near the pipes of the organ, maybe, or if the organ has a very short mechanic, is more the organ is little, more dynamic, is possible to listen. In a big church, if you are far from the organ, this is not so clear, but it's very important to give the necessary strength to the key in order to let speak the pipe in the most nice way. And this is impossible if you play on a Hauptwerk, and then is historical incorrect, because the organists were, first of all, clavichord player before, harpsichord player in France and in Italy, and later piano players. So I think is a risk a normal condition of the organist don't have the possibility to play all the day organ and to imagine, to be very sensible, to change the touch depending from organ stops, from a mechanic, from organ keyboard, from instrument to instrument. And so this is very, and all students who start without a real contact with a sound production, mechanical sound production, organ, harpsichord, piano, clavichord, the most didactical instrument, keyboard instrument of every time, clavichord. The Walter told the ABC of every musician. So
really?
This is correct, completely correct. If you miss this at the very beginning, I follow to listen for years problem of sound production, of very sensible sound production of the hand, of the fingers. And so I suggest always my students don't buy any electronic or digital organs. Somebody follows my suggestion, somebody not, but this happens.
Yeah. I can imagine then that if that becomes part of how you hear the music, then you start playing like that. It's, you know, if you start hearing
yes, no, I started playing piano when I was 4-year-old with a student of the first conservatory student of Benedetti Michelangeli, Arturo Benedetti Michelangeli, the most important Italian pianist of the century. And when he was 20, he was an organ professor here in Bologna. And my first piano teacher was a student of his first student in 1941, so 41. And so I started as a normal piano student. And then I had a passion for Baroque music, from television, from organ music. I listened some organ in the church, and I was very, very shocked. And so I wanted to start to study organ, but in the same time I bought the first CDs with or maybe LP long play with Arnoncourt cantatas recordings by Bach, and so I tried to listen the Alice Arnoncourt, his wife, the violin player, with wonderful dynamic colors like a bel canto singer in the solo violin arias in the cantata, and so also the bass played by Arnoncourt on the cello. Also Baisma, Hanner Baisma, the Bach recordings were very important for my left hand. And I tried to imitate this kind of directions, sense, and dynamic sense from Arnoncourt, Ensemble, Concertus Musico Swidini. And so when I was 14, my father let me build a clavichord. I have still here. And I started to play clavichord, Bach inventions. I played already also French suites, and tried to imitate the violin sense with the right hand, the cello sense with so the string. I started as an instrumental approach. Yes. Okay. Then I was influenced by my harpsichord professor. Sergio Bartolo was a chapel master here in San Petronio, the most important church and also musical church. In Bologna, he is also a singer. He was a falsetto singer, soprano singer, male soprano, and harpsichord player, conductor. And I listened a lot of his madrigal and also Baroque cantatas recordings, and I was very influenced by the bel canto style treatises.
I see.
And so this was more, of course, for Bach, that is for all the historical music until Rossini, until the beginning of the 20th century.
Yeah.
Yes.
But what's the difference between the harpsichord and the clavichord?
Completely. Harpsichord is a plucked instrument, like a guitar, like a lute, like a harp. There is a mechanical system to pluck ein Zupf instrument. And the clavichord is there is a percussion instrument like a piano. There is a tangent who strike the strings. But the clavichord is very sensible, very difficult to play because there is no mechanic. The hand of the every key has a tangent, and so there is only the keyboard is the mechanic. There are no hammers, no Springer, jacks in English. Nothing between your key and the string. Only a tangent, but the tangent is the last part of the key. So when you play this, of course, makes the sound very soft because the clavichord strike the string and also stop the string in the same moment. So you cannot have a big sound, a concert room sound, but this enabled to acquire a perfect technique, hand technique. And this technique, that is a wedge technique, you can apply perfectly on the organ, in another way, of course, on the harpsichord, on the piano. That is maybe a consequence of clavichord, because the piano was developed, was invented by an Italian builder, Bartolomeo Cristofori, but was not so favorite in Italy because the sound was at the beginning too soft, much softer than an harpsichord. But in Germany, Zilberman, the Germans wanted to have a more strong, more sonorous clavichord. This was the tendency of Germans. And Zilberman saw in the potential of new piano from Florence, from Christopher, this instrument to have a louder clavichord. So a louder keyboard instrument with dynamic. And the only way maybe was to have hammers. And so Zilberman and the German builders were the first master to develop the Florentine invention. That in Italy was not so favored. It was reintroduced from Vienna later. But personally, I have also a very late spinet from 1840 from Brescia. There are some instruments existing from this age, very late age, when in Italy, still for bel canto lessons, they used sometimes, very rarely, these harpsichords instead of piano in the Romantic age. So Italy was very, very, very falling in love for plucked instruments. So,
I see.
And Germans wanted to have a single instrument. So like lute, that was very near to clavichord as concept, and later piano. So I think that the clavichord is a complete, the technique of clavichord at the beginning is in principle the same of piano, of the very first pianos. Yes, very similar. The organ has also similarity in the which the harpsichord is a little bit different, but Carl Philipp Emanuel Bach wrote a very important phrase. He told that a very good clavichord player can always play harpsichord better than an harpsichordist who is not able to play clavichord.
Oh, I see.
And this, I think, that is a completely truth.
Oh,
Completely.
really?
Why? Because there is a more sensible, refined way to touch, to think, to dynamic, to the violin, ideal cello, ideal voice. And so when you use these differences at the harpsichord, the sound of harpsichord is much better, and Quant speaks clearly of this. And so from the German side, in the Renaissance, also Italian were clavichord virtuosos. Also in Spain, Spain followed to build a clavichord very late. Also in South America, the Spanish America, in Sweden, in all the Lutheran. So clavichord remained in the Spain and Portugal, in the Lutheran world, and also in Austria, but less. Haydn bought a clavichord in the last years of his life. There is still existing in Vienna, the last clavichord of Haydn. But of course, when he started, he played on his very few clavichord, the Carl Philipp Emanuel sonatas. He wrote it, and then so the harpsichord without dynamic was a perfect continuing instrument, but was not so favorite in the German-speaking land. Of course, in Italy, it was normal to have it, and then from Vienna, when the northern part of Italy was under Vienna, we bought a lot of pianos from Vienna. So, in Lombardy, in Venice part of Italy, and then also there was an Italian production of piano, not so important and refined like in Vienna, and less important, less widespread. So, but there were, but were in Vienna style, not anymore in Cristofori style.
Okay.
So the Cristofori style was followed by Zilberman, and in Spain and in Portugal, and by some students by Cristofori, Ferrini, and later also Sodi family in Florence, in Tuscany. But the Cristofori Meccanica was not so widespread in Italy. Later, the Vienna Mechanic, of course, and then develops of piano that were a continuous thing until now. So.
Yeah, but the clavichord, you have to have a lot of pressure to play it.
Not a lot. You have to have quite differentiated pressure, but is maybe, of course, the instrument is not hard to play like a modern piano, and so the way you use is less of the fingers of the front part of the hand, not all the arm, I think, but it depends from the longness of the deepness of the key. There are a lot of factors that influences this. But yes, of course, it is a weight technique in any case. Okay. And if you have always to think to the fingers equality, all the fingers have to be strong, equal strong, in order to make differentiation. And this is much more important on the clavichord, of course, because you listen the dynamic, and then of course also a harpsichord player, if he's weak in some fingers, I can listen, but it's less evident, of course. But I think that we now specialize in harpsichord, organ, clavichord, piano. For Mozart, was not so different. Mozart could play clavichord, the Stein of other pianos, the clavichord, the harpsichord, the organ in church. So now we differentiate too much, but until the beginning of 20th century, in Italy, for example, we had the organ classes only the last years of piano. In the piano classes, there were a professor, the same professor who was also organist, that taught organ and piano. So this was normal. Then in Germany, they favored clavichord. So now we have to think to clavichord for Bach or for Per Philipp or for Buxtehude or for Berger also. In France, they had clavecin. We in Italy had gravicembalo. That was the same mechanic, but another kind of instrument, of course. From the standard French harpsichord, the standard Baroque Italian harpsichord is much different. There were not so much standard instruments in Italy because we had a lot of states, a lot of dialects, languages, and also tastes, flavors a little bit different, like in historical organs in Italy. The same in Austria, the same in Germany, because we were empire. So the empire, Roman Empire, was a mixture of cultures, different dialects and languages, and so we are more similar. Italy is more similar musically and historically to the German world than to France and to England or Poland. They had a kingdom. United Kingdom. So also for the reason the choir scoring is different in the German and Italian in comparison with Handel England or Lully France or Rameau France. But this is a very complex problem. So now maybe the right.
Well, your knowledge about this is so amazing. I mean, it's I didn't. Well, I'm not even that knowledgeable about music, but I find this so fascinating. And I was wondering now, your ensemble, for example, are all the instruments that you play the musicians, do they all have period pieces in the instruments?
Yes.
So
also for music written after the French Revolution, recently we performed the Prima Solennelle by Rossini, and in the first version, so with two pianos and a harmonium, and I conducted from the harmonium, and I played the solo piano piece. But I had the cooperation with two fantastic fortepiano. We tell now fortepiano soloist, a former student of mine, who is now orchestra conductor in Germany, but also a fortepiano specialist, and a fellow of him from Basel, from Schola Cantorum. And I used a rare piano, like Rossini in the first performance, a Pleyel piano, a second piano, like Rossini in the first, and the band harpsichord, like in the first performance. So I try to use always historical instrument or copies from the original, and also for violins, of course. But this is so widespread, is a standard now, so it's nothing very. Maybe I try to follow some musicological researches a little bit less widespread, less standard. Like, for example, one per part choir as normal point of basis, point of view in Bach, or also in the Lutheran Baroque works or later Renaissance works. There are exceptions, but now we are a little bit too standard as three first violins, three second violins, three soprano, three alto, three tenor, three basses. Is not so. So the conditions were very different, and I started to investigate how was the milieu in which a composer wrote for playing work. So this, and of course, my ensemble focuses on the relationships between Italian music and Protestant music.
Yeah.
And so we were the first to record a CD, a complete album dedicated to Vincenzo Albrici. He was a Roman composer, later Kapellmeister in Dresden, in the Lutheran Dresden, before the conversion to Catholicism. And he was also Thomas organist in Leipzig, so the church where Bach later will be cantor. And I have studied together with a musicologist from America, my friend. Some words for three voices, two violins, bassoon, dulciana, and continuo, and we recorded it as first recording in the year was 2000, I think, yes, for a Swedish label. So this was the very first recording, and then 19 CDs by Schütz, yes, because this was a commission from Brilliant Classics by Peter Van Winkel, the artistic director, who gave me and my ensemble the possibility to investigate, to study, to work on these fantastic composers and music. And so I had many cooperation with very good singers from Poland, from Czech, from Germany, from Saxony, from Italy, from France, from United States. And then I have performed quite often Bach works, Bach cantatas, Bach oratorios, and the motets. Now I'm preparing the two fantastic cantatas by Goldberger, the Bach student, one of the most important composers, I think, of the century, but too early died, too young. And these two cantatas written under Bach in Leipzig are fantastic. Maybe the same, almost the same level of Bach. I think maybe the same level Bach, written maybe between the 14 years old and 16 years. So incredible music. And now I'm preparing also some solo recitals. In 2 weeks I will be in Poland, in Schlesien, in Silesia, in Schweidnitz, now is Swidnica, where there is an international Bach Fest.
Oh, okay.
In the most nice, most important Lutheran church of the history, UNESCO monument, the Friedenskirche in Schweidnitz, the Peace Church in Schweidnitz, where Jon Tomasz Adamus, a colleague and a friend of mine, now the artistic director and conductor of Capella Krakowiensis in Krakow, is organized since 20 years, I think. More or less, maybe also more, this Bach Festival, and I will play a solo harpsichord recital with Bach influences in Bologna. So I will play wonderful music by Giovanni Battista Martini, the most important Baroque composer in Bologna. Baroque and late after Baroque composer, but this music written with Bach influences in Bologna around 1738-40, and published in Amsterdam. 12 sonatas. I will play one sonatas and the Prelude of Fugue, and then I will play a suite by myself, written during the COVID pandemic, yes, but in completely Baroque style, on a cantus firmus. So there is a toccata, a ricercare, some variations on a part of cantus firmus in the bass, a sonata in string style, also always for keyboard, and a minuet, a final minuet. And then I will play the second partita by Bach, and a fantasy and fugue, fantasia et fuga in A minor, the Schmieder catalog, the 904. in A minor, yes.
Oh, okay.
And so this on the 4th August, the Friedenskirche.
Oh, it's on 4th of August. But I wanted to ask you actually about your composing, your compositions.
Yes.
If you do it all also on this Baroque style.
No, not. But I'm not a professional composer. I study composition. I teach the organ composition, but I have always written music, but mostly choir music, keyboard music. Yes, more. I think more piano than I didn't write before this piece. Nothing for harpsichord, for example. And this piece is dans le style des anciens maîtres, in the style of ancient early masters. So, but normally I compose in a coine of 20th century styles, but but I think tonal, in a tonal system or modal system. I'm not a fan of the decaphony and what happened later. Yes, more in sometimes with some minimal approach, but not really. I think more influence post Shostakovich, sometimes post Hindemith. Yes, and then I change also styles. So I'm composing now a cycle of lieder for voice and piano on beautiful poems in modern Latin language.
Oh, okay.
Yes, so not religious music, not existential this and love texts, not yes, without any reference to religion, also to pagan religion. But there are a lot of very interesting Neo-Latin poets.
What is the theme of these poems?
It changes every every song is different. I have written a vegan lied, so from Pascoli. Pascoli was our one of the most important Italian poets, but he was also one of the most important Neo-Latin poets. He won a lot of times the Amsterdam competition in Neo-Latin, and I used a lullaby from Talusa, and this is the oldest text I used.
Really?
Yes, this is for mezzo soprano and piano, and then I have composed on a beautiful song, poem, short poem by Joseph Tusiani. He was an Italian poet who went to New York, and he composed poems. He wrote poems in Italian, in his dialect from South Italy, from Puglia, in Latin, and also in English. A lot of English poems, very nice also. And he wrote a very famous, one of the most important Neo-Latin poems of the last part of the 20th century. It is a poem on the New York underground. So, and in Latin, a fantastic poem. I have composed one song on it. And now I'm finishing when I have not so much time to compose, unfortunately, and I'm finishing a lead song on a German, half German, so a German poet, half Lutheran and half Jew, and he went Alexander Gertner. He went to South America and to North America later, and he composed 2 booklets of Neo-Latin poems, fantastic. And I'm writing another lullaby on very famous for Neo-Latin specialists, and in form of a fugue for voice and piano. And then some German Neo-Latin poet and I would like also to compose other songs on Croatian, Russian, Latin poets, and maybe also Japanese and Finnish. There are very important Finnish, Latin tradition.
Do you speak all these languages?
No, I don't speak. No, Latin is only Latin. I studied Latin in gymnasium in the school, so but I'm not an expert of Latin. But I love the sound of Latin, like many musicians. Also, Rossini told the older Rossini told that Latin was his favorite language for music, and I think that and then it's very international because it's a died language, so it's like to create a distance, very postmodern, I think, from the sense, from the versification technique, and from the music, and then there is not the problem I had with shoot to have a good German pronunciation, good Italian pronunciation, good French pronunciation. Everybody can pronounce Latin as he prefers, in German way, in Italian way, in a historical Roman way. Cicero, Cicero, or so. Everything is possible, and this is very good for singers because Vienna singer can sing my songs, a French singer the same, a Finnish singer, a Russian, so no problem for that. And I think that, and then you have to translate in order to understand. So there is this sort of distancing between.
I see.
And so it's something postmodern. So when I compose, I'm a little bit postmodern, but I'm also studying since years the Baroque composing techniques, so partimento and basso continuo treatises, historical counterpoint, and so when I teach the Baroque fugue, keyboard fugue, so Bach as model, or German and Italian masters normally. So sometimes I like also to compose in like a man born 1670, 1680, with not different. Yes, so why not? It's possible. Yes, today. Maybe it's not very appreciated by my colleagues, but my composers' colleagues. Try to be always a new system, and always more modern than modernism. But I think that modernity is and originality is a very complex question. Yes, so.
No, that's true. But what are you doing now with these compositions of the poems? When will you record this?
Starts from my fingers, so from fingers ideas from the keyboard, and when I compose, I compose at the keyboard. I improvise, and then the best ideas I wrote down, and I elaborate, I create. But I'm not a Tafel componist. And so maybe I'm not for my colleagues really a modern composer. But of course, I don't think that it's a shame to compose in neotonal language. I appreciate a lot of American classical composers living who can compose. I appreciate also English and Scandinavian composers. They are not afraid to use to still use the modal and tonal language with new flavors, new tastes, new developing. But is not. Really, the contemporary compositions, learning composition is often for me a little bit boring for my senses. Yes, I'm a little bit maybe more Epicurean. So music has to move the chemistry of this body, of the soul. So, and I think that the post-Schoenberg system that is, of course, very, very important for. I know the principles of these composition techniques, but are a little bit distant for me. And I think that sometimes it's better some good film music than many. Is something not very, very popular. What I say in my context, but some good film music is more interesting than many very avant-garde compositions.
Oh yeah.
This is my taste, of course. And
yeah.
It's my ignorance, maybe, but I think that to invent something intellectually, something dangerous, and there is any more a tradition with a following between audience and compositions, composers, and these are always a little bit dangerous, but spectrally and all these things are very fascinating, I think, are not for my ears, maybe. Yeah, so I compose.
Are you very self-critical of your
Yes,
work?
of course. I think it's one of the most important things for artists, to be always critical and to try to make always better and better. Of course, yes. This I try to do what I'm able to do, but of course, and then I try to do the things I like and I love, and I know that are good for me. Of course, I'm terrible in painting, and so I won't be never able to paint something. So I don't do. Is not my my genetic. So the music I love. I try to do because it's near to my soul, my tastes, of course. But this is for every artist normal.
Yeah. Matteo, do you cook?
I cook a little bit, yes. When
really?
I have time, yes, of course. My mother was my cook model because she's an incredible cook, and I had the privilege to eat always so good from my born, and so I observed a lot her. I tasted for her the new inventions, and so I try when I'm alone. I try to cook, but I was a little bit less. I was more active in cooking 15 years ago, maybe. Now I'm a little bit more tired, but more older. Yes, but in any case, I try to eat always in a good way, also in good restaurant where I know that there is a good way of cooking. So yes, I think that this is typical in my country, I think. And also in my region, Bologna.
Bologna. But I know Italians have a very specific way of doing things, and then Americans come and they just change all the recipes and make it different. But in Bologna, it's Italy or it's the bolognese sauce from
ragu. We tell ragu.
Yes.
Ragu. Yes.
Ragu alla bolognese. Can you make a
ragu? I can do. Yes. In this case, I follow my grandmother suggestions. Yes, and it's good. Yes, but there are. I had two grandmothers very good also to cook, like many Italians, and I try to do it, of course. Well, my father was also an excellent chef, and so in a very Bolognese way, yes, of course. My mother is a little bit more open to outer influences
okay.
also,
Yeah.
yes, and me also, because I have traveled in Europe quite a
Yeah.
lot. So, and I love also French
yeah.
style or Portuguese, also Spanish, of course, and then also I can eat very good also in Vienna, for example, and
Okay.
or in Romania, yeah.
Yeah.
Or in the Greek kitchen is very good.
Okay.
So the Mediterranean way of cooking in general are very interesting. Yes.
Okay.
Yes, but this is not.
Yeah. Matteo, do you have when you perform, do you have a little ritual before you go on stage? How do you prepare before a performance?
I drink some vitamins before, and maybe sometimes I follow the suggestion of my former harpsichord teacher, Sergio Arto, who likes to eat some ginseng, yes. Ginseng, yes, but sometimes this gives me normally concentration,
yeah,
and also calm. So. But now in the last period, I drink only some vitamins, so.
Okay.
Or maybe I eat some dark chocolate. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Do you
have
get
more
nervous?
energy? Yes.
Yeah. Do you get nervous before a performance?
Me, yes, I prefer in general to record music.
Yeah.
I think if paradox, if they ask me to record only or to make only concerts, I prefer to record only.
Really?
I think yes, because maybe I'm in this sense I'm very postmodern. I like the possibility to reproduce again something.
Okay.
I think Walter Benjamin was one of my philosophical model, and I think, but also concert is for me something more liar, because you play once and everything finished. So in the recording, you have to listen, and so you fix something normally is not possible to fix the music.
Yeah.
And an interpretation, you can change interpretation every time you play. So, and you can have many different contrasting interpretation of the same passage, very interesting in different ways. And so when you fix once, my recording work is also for me very stressing, because normally I record many times and in very different way.
Yeah.
And then when I have to choose to make editing, I'm embarrassed because there are many different ways, and every possibility is nice, coherent, and so to fix in a new performance, many different performances through editing, and is always a very difficult thing. So when I play a concert, I'm much more relaxed, and I play for sure less precise, technically maybe, but in a more spontaneous way, maybe.
Oh, I see.
It happens because you have to give one sense in that moment, and you know that there are thousands possibilities, but you give one and then finish. But I like also to record for me my concert, but there's a very different way in which I play in comparison with a recording. And then recordings maybe are also too perfect. Now I start sometimes to think that to leave something less refined, less precise would be better. even if you can listen again, and this is dangerous. But sometimes the recordings I did are too perfect, and some little mistakes, some little timing of milliseconds could be more. Yes, of course. Like when you record, you give a product to people for the next 10, 20, 40, 100 years. So with digital reproduction is so the concert make me nervous, but also nervous for a moment. The recording make me more tired for months because I have to work. Post-production work, the editing, the sound, the mixing, and so the organization, of course. Then the recordings are, I think, most important because everybody has possibilities to listen you on a CD now with streaming, with YouTube, Spotify. So you can reach a much wider public. And this is also important. Yesterday, an organist from America has written me a very nice email with congratulations about my continuing shoot, and I listened again this Harpsichordist by shoot. After many years, I didn't listen anymore my recording on YouTube, and I noticed that there were 33,000 views of this video. So these are numbers incredible. It's impossible to play a concert with shoes for 33,000 people. So and recording is much, I think, much more important in this age. That is a false musical age because we fix something that is impossible to fix. So, but it's like theater and cinema, no? Big difference. So maybe a very good theater actor has to change the technique in the cinema shooting. No? So, of course, for sure. So the concert is now I leave a concert like less stressing things, and if there is a little mistake, this is very human. I'm not horror of it, and why not?
But that's good. I like the fact that things are not perfect. I think it makes it more interesting when it's not so perfect.
Yes, it could be. Yes.
Yeah, but I think now that you're saying about this, but about your recording that's been online and that can be viewed, I think these interviews will also be interesting to see, because even the interviews that I did with with artists who were in lockdown, that I started doing in February, if I look now back into February, and it's not even a year, I see what we were talking about, and I see how much things have changed since February to now.
Yes, of course. Yeah.
It's amazing. It's really unbelievable. And that we have this ability to have these things now online that we can go back and have a look at. So our interview, Matteo, will also be online now for a very long time.
Yes, but this was an improvisation, so maybe I terrible English, so will be.
No, your English is your conversation is so interesting. I'm really fascinated, and I will definitely be following your ensemble and what you are doing, because I think I really find it interesting, these works that you're doing, and that it's all period works and so on. And I have a little bit more knowledge now about the harpsichord and the clavichord. So I'm going to find out now a little bit more about that as well. So thank you so much for this. And thank you so much for your time.
Thank you to you.
Yeah.
Auf Wiedersehen.
Okay. Thank you, Matteo. Have a lovely weekend. Bye.
To you. Bye. Thank you.